Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Habib, for your introduction and your invitation here in this university, and thank you for coming this evening, listening and sharing views on a very important topic. And it's a real pleasure. It's not the first time I'm visiting South Africa, and it has been a long relationship for me. It was even before I came, supporting the struggle for justice in this country. And then when I was able to come to carry on relationships with Muslims and people of other faith in the country, and coming to a better understanding that we have common principles, shared principles, and shared objectives in life, and what is just said about this university and our vision is something that we are sharing, and I think it's important. You can't hear me? I'm sorry, I will try to find a way. So maybe you have to speak closer to the mic. Is that better? So what I said up to now, it's not so important. I won't repeat. I was thanking the university anyway. So having said that, let me, because 45 minutes for such a topic, it's not a long time, and I really think that it's important to have a discussion afterward, questions and answers, and even comments on what is going to be said. But let me start with an introduction and three main points that I want to make about what is now an ongoing reality in the West. It's almost every year, every 6 months, we have a new controversy when it comes to the Muslim presence and Islam in itself. And when it comes to sense of humor, we can see that what was said, you know, with the Bush administration, we are not at war with Islam, we are at war with terrorists. Sometimes when we shift the topic, we can see that there is a problem with not only with terrorists, but with Islam. And very often it's raised and tackled through sense of humor, freedom of expression, and women's rights. This is where very often we have these discussions. And these controversies, we might decide that this is not serious, it's not important, we are not going to engage, and still I think we have to take this seriously. Because from one controversy to another is shaping an atmosphere where Islam is a problem and Muslims are perceived as a problem. And if we just ignore this and not come to something which is, are we clear in what we are advocating as Muslims? This is the first question. And what is our answer to people saying to Muslims, at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge it. You have a problem with humor. You have a problem with sense of humor. You don't laugh, or not enough. And you have a problem with the way we need to deal with freedom of expression. And willing it or not, if so many people have this impression, we should be self-critical at least and ask ourselves, do we have a clear response, a clear understanding of where we stand in coming to this discussion? So what is at stake? It's not only to talk about freedom of expression, of sense of humor. This is an important point. But when it comes to this, it's our relationship to humor as religious people. When you are a practicing Muslim, a committed Muslim, or you live in Muslim majority countries, what is allowed for us to express ourselves and to be able to smile, to laugh, and about what? What are the limits? We have to discuss this and try to come to a better understanding of our religious principles. And by saying this, what is at stake is for Muslims, before responding to the controversy, is to come to a better understanding from within. So this is the critical attitude and self-critical attitude that sometimes is missing we are so sure and so convinced that all this is done against us that we are obsessed with the answers and not with the very essence of the question. And in fact, sometimes by dealing with the very essence of the questions, you come to something that has to be discussed and addressed from within the Muslim majority countries or within the Muslim communities, is the way we deal with freedom of expression, the way we deal with sense of humor, and the way we deal with our societies and our fellow citizens and our fellow brothers and sisters in humanity and in religion. The third dimension here is that you cannot today, when you look at all these controversies, deal with it without talking about politics. Because behind the whole controversies, there is politics. It has to do with ideology and politics. So it's good to answer the question in a clear way. It's not good to be politically naive, not understanding what is at stake from behind this. Because some people are saying, you Muslims, you don't get what the West thinks. And say, who is this West you are talking about? Who are the people that you are saying are portraying? You are essentializing the West as much as you are essentializing Muslims and Islam. And you should not accept this, because this is a position, an ideological position, which is wrong. It's wrong to portray the West as there are always this kind of freedom of expression when you have the right to ridicule the sacred of other people. That's not the truth. So in our position to accept this postulate is in fact to fall into the trap of this binary vision, us versus them, Muslims against the West, or Muslims against freedom of expression and the West for it. I think that this has to be discussed, and to get it right, it's a political, ideological discussion that we are facing. And having said this, it's also, and you can see this, a power struggle. It's a position of power. Who is laughing at whom? Very important question. Who is laughing and about what? It's also a question where what you said about the class division, it's also something that we have to take into account, and it will come out of my presentation that you can see that there is something that we have to ask dealing with this. Now, let me start with the internal discussion, and it's always, you know, it's a methodology which is important from an Islamic viewpoint. If you come to the old Islamic legal tradition, philosophical tradition, intellectual tradition, there is something which is very interesting, and we are not studying enough what was produced by Muslim scholars in the Middle Ages, for example in Spain, but not only, in the 10th, 11th and 12th century. When they were to tackle an issue, very often they were starting with the internal principles, is how do we deal with our own understanding? What are our principles? What is the essence of our religion? And then we tackle the issue. When you do this, in fact, is when you have a sense of confidence. In fact, where you are confident, you answer and address the question at the center of your principles and the essence of your tradition. But when you are on the defensive, you react at the periphery. At the periphery. You respond to the questions, but you are not able to question the question. You get me right here? To question the question. What do you, why this question? From where this question is coming? Why are you questioning this? And it comes from the center, when you are at the center of our tradition. Now, if you look at our way of dealing with our tradition today, when it comes to sense of humor, when it comes to laughing and smiling and all this dimension that has to do with life, it's quite clear that we have two problems that we have to deal with. The first problem is with freedom of expression. It's clear when we deal with Muslim majority countries or with Muslim communities, when it comes to freedom, what am I free to say, there is something that has to be discussed. It's not clear. The second is about sense of humor. It's as if the moment you start to be a practicing Muslim, you have to laugh less. If you can laugh still. And you are laughing at it, be careful about the quality of your spirituality, but the point is, and more now even. So it's a vicious circle. You cannot get out of it. But the point is that we have these two problems, and we have to deal with them in a critical way. I don't have time in the time that is allocated here to go to all the details, but let me just highlight some of the points that are important. The first is about freedom and the way we deal with freedom. It's true that in the Islamic tradition, we have rules, and we have to be quite clear that from an Islamic viewpoint, coming to the rules, we avoid criticizing the sacred, our sacred and our sacred references, and we avoid to do this to the others. We have to respect this dimension. لا تسبوا الذين يدعون من دون الله فيسبوا الله عدوا بغير علم. So you don't go, you are even responsible of the reaction of the people. You don't criticize what they believe in, which is not God or something else, what they believe in without the oneness of God. They will end up criticizing God without knowledge. Look at this, meaning that you start with an understanding that you are responsible of the reaction. So in order to avoid the reaction of people criticizing God, you don't criticizing what they believe in. So it starts with responsibilities, that it doesn't start with a prohibition on the way the people are expressing themselves. Is the way you deal with your own understanding of sacred. And what is important here is the way you want the people to deal with your sacred is the way you have to deal with them. You don't want to be ridiculed or to see the prophet, peace be upon him, or the religious reference, so you avoid doing this. So the starting point of the ethical ground and our rules is avoid it on ethical ground and understand that there are limits. So we don't usually, and this is something which is shaping a culture, it's shaping an understanding, we don't laugh, we don't ridicule the sacred, because this is the essence of life. So this is a very important ethical ground, and some of the scholars from this ethical ground started to put some legal framework by saying these are the limits. Now, on the limits themselves, we don't agree. We don't agree on the limits. There are many views among the scholars from the very beginning on what are the limits and in which way we have to deal with this. The point is that with the scholars at the beginning of our Islamic tradition, the legal tradition, you can see that they were relying very much on the spiritual understanding, the awareness of the people, and the decency that were coming out of a field in Islam which is not based on rules but on common understanding. And by the way, you know that when you come back to the Quran, what is accepted by the people is not put in halal haram, it's al-ma'ruf, is known by the people as being good or bad, relying on a collective psychology, a shared culture, that there are things that we don't do, and this is coming. And so some were going far by putting rules, and the starting point for the scholars was to say, we rely on the common sense. We rely on the ma'ruf, meaning what is known by the people. So in this, there is something which is important, and some of the scholars, and you can see here the psychological factor that has to do with ethics. With the law, you come with the law and you put limits and say you cannot do this, and this is wrong in Islam. So it's true that blasphemy, the way it's put in Western terms, is something that in Islam from the very beginning was understood as against our religion, against religion, so we avoid this as a matter of fact. And there was a gray area where the scholars were going, and this is where you understand the psychological factor. When the scholars were confident with their tradition, they were able to deal with many things that today we are scared of talking about. And it's coming from because of the fact that we are on the defensive. We feel that we are dominated. So the natural way of responding to this perceived or real domination is to stick to rules, to what is halal and what is haram. In fact, this obsession with rules came in the Muslim mind not when they were confident, but when they thought they were under threat. In historical terms, for example, you go and you read a Suyuti. Suyuti is speaking about things that today, if you read the book, you ask yourself if you can carry on. Why? Because he's talking, if you speak about religion, you speak about life. And if you speak about life, you speak about sexuality. He was able to deal with this without being scared. This was an open field where we can talk about this. Why? Because we deal with life, and life has to do with our sexuality. Today, we are so scared of what is coming from the West that we tend to put limit in everything we are saying when it comes to this. For example, in arts, we have scholars afterwards saying poetry is not Islamic. When you come in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and even afterward, what they were dealing with in poetry, in the fact even the way grammar were put, Alfiyat ibn Malik is poetry, is the way you use language to express beauty, even with semantic, even with grammar, is something that the scholars were just dealing with this in a free way. Why? In fact, not because they were not Muslims as we are, but they were talking in a state of confidence. We can do this because this is life. Why? Because there is something in Islam, al-aslu fil ashya al-ibaha. The first principles in things when it comes to public affairs or social relationship is permission, not prohibition. We change the parameter when we are scared. So the first attitude will be, we first prohibit it, it's prohibited first, and then we see it's halal. And that's the wrong attitude. But it comes to something which has to do with our history and our understanding of the way we deal with the rules in a protective way, with this confidence I am talking about. Even with rulers, that you have some scholars, they were much more courageous than many of the scholars that we have today. And you know that this is the reality, even in South Africa. You had an elite of scholars in this country who were supporting apartheid. Never forget that. Even if Islam, it's for no difference between classes and colors, that there is justice for black and white, you had people in the name of Islam who were supporting the regime. So we have to be cautious not to confuse between the great principles of Islam and the distortion that we have within our community. And it comes out of the context. And you can have this kind of attitude. The scholars of the past, in a state of confidence, we had all, by the way, all the Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, they were all facing what? Imprisonment. Why? Because they were talking about freedom of expression. They were challenging the rulers. Challenging the rules. So freedom of expression is the way you are courageous with the way you challenge power, with freedom, and the way we have to deal with it, it's... Okay. I don't know what is next. I was saying that when it comes to freedom and this obsession with rules and no, the first attitude was to rely on what is commonly accepted and this sense of decency and ethical background that we have within the society. And we'll come to this when we answer the question, but we have to rely on this and also to be confident enough to say we don't have a problem with freedom of expression. We should open up on this. Now, to come with, not to respond to what is done to us by saying we need laws, but to understand that in this gray area, what is necessary is much more education and a sense of decency that we have to nurture within our societies and wherever we are. But the position of confidence and the position of we don't have a problem with this and say these are the limits that we have on ethical ground, not always on law, because the law are not going to change mindsets. The law are not going to change the way people are dealing with their rights. And I think that this is something that we have to discuss. It's a long discussion, this is just to raise the point where we have a problem. We also have a problem with what I said before, sense of humor. And as I said, when you come to the prophet's life, the messenger's life, you can understand that this is where sense of humor has to do with what? Has to do with the way we deal with our culture, and it's very much cultural, by the way. It's true that it's cultural. You know, it's not enough to know the language of a country and a culture. Sometimes you can feel that you are part of the culture when you get this, the sense of humor. Sometimes you know the language, but when they are joking, you don't get it. You say, why are they laughing? Because there is something which is very deep in the culture, that it's part of it. And this is something that we have to acknowledge. This part of what? Something which is essential in Islam. Islam is not about halal and haram. Islam is about well-being, to feel good. And this is the attitude of the Prophet ﷺ when he was saying, Bashiru, Bashiru wa la tunaffiru. Call the people, this is good what you have. And yassiru, it's making easy, not making, do not make it difficult for the people. Meaning what? Well-being. And it's one of the objectives of our spirituality is to be at peace with ourselves and to feel good. To feel good is not bad, as sometimes we have it in the religious discourse. So when people are telling us the way you deal with sense of humor is sometimes very problematic as Muslims, we have to acknowledge that the way we are teaching Islam is very much based on rules and not enough on well-being. Not enough on this dimension of the Prophet's biography, which is dealing with arts, which is dealing with beauty, which is dealing with poetry, which is dealing with songs, which is doing, and this was the case, that when he was talking and came from Mecca to Medina and he was with Al-Ansar, he asked about, did we send the two women who were singing because Al-Ansar, they like it? What is he saying? It's not enough to have a halal marriage. The cultural dimension is essential. They should feel good. And he said this to whom again? To Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So we have a sense here in our religion that we need to come with this dimension. And even with poetry, of course, there are dimensions in art that when you are ridiculing or were insulting, this is not min al-ma'ruf. But poetry, where it's beauty, he took his own clothes and he put it on the poet by saying, I like what you are saying. So, meaning that beauty, entertainment, arts, and sense of humor that is expressing this well-being is something which is part of our religion. He did it with his own wife when she was young and in the mosque, when the visitor were there, by protecting her to see the way they were playing, and he was playing with her, so having this sense of humor. And even with this old woman, when he said, people with white eyes are not entering paradise, and she was blind and old. She thought, oh, what do you mean? Say, no, I'm joking. We all have white eyes. So no, he was saying only people who have white eyes will enter paradise. So she thought that she was going to be prevented from this. So he was joking in a way something which is very essential is, am I entering paradise? And making it possible to feel good. Today in our religion, we are so much on the defensive, then you are not sure when you laugh that it's right. And this is a mindset which is there in our religion. So I think that the best answer when people are asking us about sense of humor is not straight to say, to put the limits, but to ask ourselves, what do we accept as something which is this part of our well-being as Muslims today? our contribution. And in the past, in a state of confidence, this was something which was very important, and you can get this in the biography. And many scholars, they deal with this, so we are used to laugh in things that have to do with our religion. What are you going to do if a lion is entering a mosque and you are praying? If you can keep your ablution, carry on praying. You're laughing. Is it haram? If you can keep your ablution, try. And this guy who is coming to the scholar saying, why are we saying Salamu Alaikum in our right and Salamu Alaikum in our left? And say, you know, in Islam, the angels are on both sides, but there is one angel on the right writing what you are doing good. And on the left, what we are going bad. I say, I'm saying Salamu Alaikum to both. So just at the end of the prayer, he said, Salamu Alaikum, his right. And he said, no, I'm not going to tell you Salamu Alaikum. Look at this. What is this? This is something which is our essential dimension in our religion. We can just feel good about it. And you know what? At the end, you will get a teaching here which is essential. You know, on your right is a fard. On your left is a sunnah. So you get a fiqhi dimension out of laughing and smiling. We need to reconcile the Muslims with entertainment, well-being, humor, and arts. And this is what I get out of the controversies. I want to learn, not only to react and to say these people don't like us. I want out of this to reassess the problem that we have with our community, where on a state of defensiveness, it's always about rules, not about well-being. And Islam is not about this. Let us being able to address this by saying we have a problem, and even when sometimes you can have jokes and the sense of humor. Now it's by stressing on this that you can get a sense of why and what are the limits that we are putting. Why? Because in every situation we want to laugh, and we are able and we are willing to feel good in a dignified way. Dignified way. So and this is where we understand for all the people around the world, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, we are promoting freedom and expression and sense of humor, but we will never undermine something which is a principle, the human dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, we gave dignity to human beings. And this is a stand, and I think really that in the West, the great majority of the people, if we are clear on the way we express this well-being, arts and sense of humor, and come with these limits, we are going to be in the majority, not in the minority. It's not true that the majority of the Western, they just want to laugh at the secret of people. No, that's not true. This is coming from lobbies, it's coming from people who are putting pressure and media. Now we have to assess what we can and we cannot. But this attitude that is accepting this binary vision Est against Islam on this, I think it's misleading and it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because it means that we cannot communicate. We don't understand the way we communicate with this. So now, when it comes to the way people are saying in the West, we should be able to ridicule whatever we want because freedom of expression should be should be absolute. By the way, it's never absolute, and we'll come to this. But in this, what should be our attitude? Now, we know that it's a context when people are putting some pressure, and in fact they are using freedom of expression and sense of humor to touch us where we are very sensitive. It's how do we deal with principles, our rules, and that we don't laugh at sacred. And by the way, we are not the only people, not only the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, and the Buddhists, and in many other societies. In Africa, when I was dealing with Christians in Africa, they look at the West by asking themselves, where are they heading? What is the point? What are they doing with this? So they also have a problem. So this perception that this is a majority trend, it's wrong. The West is a minority in the world today. It's a minority in numbers. Even though they have power, It doesn't mean that we have to avoid the question, as I'm saying, but we have to come with the true and the real questions as to pluralistic society and the way we deal with it. Now, in the way we deal with our sacred principles and even figures and the prophet for us, it's once again to be able to get what I said from the very beginning, our responsibility. And you know, when it started in the controversy about Salman Rushdie in the 80s, 88, 89, and then the controversy in Denmark, I was involved in all this discussion. First, I was against the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. I think that this was a political fatwa. It was not a fatwa on the very issue. And the way it was issued from the beginning was problematic, because it took time and then it came from a state, and the way it was put in religious terms was disputable, to say the least. But having said that, after that, we had the discussion on the cartoons issues in Denmark. Sorry, is this mine or yours? Okay, sorry. Yes, we had this discussion in Denmark, and what my proposal to the Danish Muslims at that point is, you are attacked, you don't like it, and you should be able, in the name of your freedom of expression, to say, I don't like it. But take an intellectual critical distance. Don't react emotionally. This is exactly what is expected from you. And this is where now, with our sacred, we should be clear on the fact that we don't like it, that we don't ridicule, and we are not going to do it to any. And when, for example, some of our fellow European Arab Muslim citizens said, this is double standard. What we are going to do is to ridicule the Jews and the suffering of the Jews, and this is our answer to show them that there is a double standard. They say, this is not the answer. This is not the answer. You don't play with, you know, the sensitivities of the people because your sensitivity has been wounded. It's not the way. A critical distance is where we say it in a clear way, and the wiser we are, the better we are going to be understood and heard, is to say, we don't like it, do whatever you want, that's fine. If you think that this is your culture, I think that you are undermining the very essence of your own civilization. In fact, you are acting against true freedom of expression. But in fact, this is not the point. The point is the ideological and the political discussion that we also have to address. But the critical distance is the way today in our world we keep the principle of freedom, the principle of entertainment, feeling good. This is us and we want it. This is our religion. And then when we are attacked, we look beyond what is done, and in a wise way we say, we don't like it, and you do whatever you want. And the way we answer is with decency and an ethical ground. This is the way. And I can tell you something. In the last, sometimes it's going too far. In the last controversy in France with Charlie Hebdo, I keep on repeating this, 51% of the French people were against publishing the cartoon, saying it's too far. Why are you doing this? Because they are questioning the very intention of the people. What do you want? And you know what was my answer to Charlie Hebdo? They were saying, no, it's for freedom of expression. We are the protectors of freedom of expression. I said, that's fine. I heard that you have some financial problems with your newspaper, and it might be that you are making money. If this is not the case, I have one question. Can you give all the money you are making out of this controversy and you give them to the victims of violent extremists in Mali, for example? They didn't answer. But this was heard. Why? Because they are doing it for another purpose. And it's clear now that it's a business. Islam is making money out of this controversy. So we should not be naive on this, to look at this and not only talk to the people who are provoking you, but people to talk to the people who are listening to you, and also to talk to Muslims, and not to accept any emotional reaction by saying, because I feel bad, it's legitimate for me to react in such a way. I think that this is problematic, and as Muslims, it's clear that we need to get this better understanding and take a critical distance. Now, there is also something that we have to keep in mind in all this discussion quite quickly is the Western Muslims, where the Muslims are within the same cultural setting, they did not react with violence. It didn't happen in Denmark, it didn't happen in the Netherlands, it didn't happen in the States, it didn't happen in France. There were no violence. The violence came from southern countries, where in fact some, and this is the problem that we also have in political terms, that we have religious populists who are making a point and saying you are only a good Muslim when you are against the West. This binary vision that you are against the West makes you a good Muslim is a problem. And as much as I'm critical towards the populists in the West, I should be critical of the Muslim populists that are playing with religion, playing with emotions, and getting ground with this kind of rhetoric. So this is where I'm not saying here that we have to blame, only to blame and to condemn the people. I can understand why some are reacting in such an emotional way, and I will explain this. But I don't like these people who are playing with emotions in the name of religions and by saying this is the only way, I'm going to kill you if you do this. When I was in Pakistan just after the cartoon, I can tell you, I was in Pakistan in Karachi, I went there just after the cartoon controversy. I was scared. I was scared by leaders who were pushing the people in the streets and people who are ready to kill in the name of their emotion, not in the name of the very principle that we are talking about. Which, is this the right answer? It's not. So we have a problem between our principles and the way we are explaining them and the way we are explaining them to our people and the great majority of the Muslims in the global South, or the way we are explaining them to the West. Now, having said this, the whole discussion here, it's between our principles and to promote something which is a dignified attitude and a sense of decency in ethical ground. Now, when we come to our discussion, and this is where I think we have to be critical within our own reference, understanding the principles, understanding what I said about well-being, and understanding in which way we have to educate ourselves between the gray area where things are possible to the decency where we understand that there are limits, and not to translate everything into law and halal and haram. That's not going to work in such a situation. Now, when it comes to our discussion with the West, very quickly 4 points that I want to make. The first one is people are coming to you and saying, you know, it's freedom. We should be free to say whatever you want, and you Muslims, you should accept to be ridiculed as all the others. And it's as if they are saying that there is something which is called absolute freedom of expression, which doesn't exist. Any society, there is no absolute freedom. And first, the first thing that is condemned by law is any kind of racist statements. Now, even in some countries, when you deny the very existence of what they call, and what is in fact the extermination of the Jews, and they called Holocaust, the right way of putting it is extermination of the genocide against the Jews. When you deny this, you can be just go and you can be sued because you deny this. So history is becoming something which is under law. It depends what is your take on this. So it means that freedom of expression is limited depending on what you are talking about and how you deal with this. So this kind of absolute freedom, it's not there. But more importantly, and this was also the answers coming from the Muslims, some Muslim majority countries were saying, in fact, we don't want you and we don't accept the fact that you are ridiculing our religion. We want new law against blasphemy. And we were asked about this, and my position on this is we don't need new law. It's not going to solve the problem. It's not about reducing the scope of freedom that will get the people respecting us. It's not going to work like this. I think that it's much more important to understand that there is a framework within which what we need to do is very much to let the people know more about our principles and to be part of the collective psychology of the country. In fact, the way I'm putting it is for us to enter the narrative of the society, to be part from within, and not just to respond to a so-called absolute freedom by our restricted way of dealing with freedom. Because all this, you know, when the people are saying, oh, but in the UK they have a law against blasphemy, that's true, but they are not, it's not used, and it's very much counterproductive in the way you deal with people. So I don't think that this is the way, and we don't need new law, but we need to be clear on what is legal, and we accept that within what is legal there are things that are permissible, and we also have to say what is ethical. And this is where it's very important for us. What I was saying before that we have fellow citizens. If we talk to them, if they understand the very meaning of who is the messenger for us in our tradition, and the sacred dimension, if you say, we don't laugh at this, if we explain, they will get a sense of what we have and why it's important. And thank you. I think that this is central here. If you come with law, it's not going to be an educational process. If we are part of the narrative, it's the way we have. And you know what is very interesting? You don't know this story, and myself, I was surprised. Because the people, you know, who published the newspaper which published the cartoon in Denmark, they were very much, and I was there when one of the journalists from this newspaper, this very newspaper, came to me and said, it's a group of people and they want to provoke a reaction. They want the Muslims to be provoked and to react. He himself, he knew the people and told me, it's a strategy, it's a game that they are playing. So it was not about freedom of expression, it's about we are going to get them. And my first reaction to the Muslims there, I was with the journalists and with the leaders, young leaders there, I was telling them, don't react. And for 3 months, it worked. Until someone went to the Muslim majority countries with some of the caricatures, and the story started there. And they were nurturing the story. And you know what happened afterward? The Danish Muslims, they did not react. They were very much involved in the discussion, except few leaders who were there. And I wrote afterward, my answer to this story was, in a way, the biography that I wrote about the Prophet, the messenger that you have. You know who published the book in Danish? The very newspaper. They published the answer to what they were doing by publishing. The book is published by the same. So in fact, is to show, they wanted to show we are not against freedom of expression. And this is our answer. We are not against freedom of expression. We are for dignified freedom of expression. You do this, this is our answer. You will respond to your lack of dignity with a dignified way, which is what we have in the Quran. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما. When you are attacked, just say peace. And peace, it's not peace and I go out and I don't discuss. I'm involved in the discussion in a dignified way. And what I want you to understand, that lots of people around the world, they get that, they understand this. Get Wilders for 2, 3, 6 months. He was saying, I'm going to launch a movie, Fitna, where I'm going to turn apart the Quran. And it was a big controversy. And the Muslims started to laugh at what he was doing and making jokes and preparing the ground, saying we are not going to react. At the end, there were no reaction at all. He ended up saying, thank you for not reacting. But in fact, for him, it was not what he wanted. He wanted to create the controversy. Who constructed the controversy? The media. And this is where we have to get it right in our understanding that in this, as much as we are reconsidering our understanding from within, what I did in the first part, it's important here to come to this understanding and to understand that ethics is based on collective psychology, on memory, and you have to deal with this. You have to enter into the secret of this collective psychology understanding, and this is by being in the mainstream, by talking to people. And once again, I would never advocate less freedom. I would advocate a better quality of dealing with our freedom. You are responsible of your freedom. And when you talk like this is something which is common sense for many. Once again, Muslims might have a problem, and some of our scholars here are very tough sometimes on this. And as I said, I don't like this obsession with halal haram. And every time there is something which is haram or presented as haram. There is something which is also important when you deal with sense of humor and when you deal with your own society, is sometimes you enter the narrative of this society and you understand that in any society you will find that there is freedom of expression, but there are things we don't laugh at in any society. So for example, I would say that some experiences of apartheid in this society in South Africa, you don't laugh at it. It's too sensitive. It was too painful, too much suffering. In Europe, and this is why I said to the people in Belgium when they wanted to respond by attacking the Jews, I said that's not right. Why? Because there is something which is the trauma. You have to get it. The European trauma about the extermination of the Jews left scars and things that were very deep. You don't come and laugh at this. So in fact, there is nothing in the law preventing you from laughing at the suffering of the Jews. But you don't do it. It's not ethical. It's a lack of decency. It's a lack of understanding. So you don't do it. And when I'm talking to my fellow European citizens, say, you know what? The level of sensitivity you have with this historical experience is the way we deal with the Prophet, peace be upon him. We don't laugh at this. It's the same. So what came out of your history comes out of our principles. And the love that we have is sacred as much as the suffering that you know. It's legal, but it's silly. So this is where, but you know, we need to mean it. It's that some Muslims are very happy with these answers we give to the West, but not with the first part when it comes to us. So I'm critical and self-critical. I'm self-critical and critical and trying to come with a better understanding of what, but you got it. No laws and more education and the sense of the common narrative. The last point here is also to be clear on something. And I was happy that you were talking about class divisions and the reality of this. In fact, when people are demonstrating in the global south, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, in Egypt, and you have people sitting in the West and say, look at these people, this savage. These people don't know how to deal with, you know, the great values of freedom of expression, and say, who are you? From where are you talking when you do this? Who is laughing at whom? Because at the end of the day, there is something that we have to address. Some people in the West, in their comfortable industrialized society, full of wealth, they are talking about freedom of expression, and they are shocked when people in the streets are demonstrating, while these people are telling them, you are touching what is sacred in our life and give us the strength to survive. Because we don't have money, we don't have jobs, we are in poor society. Now you are touching. So there is something which is the humor of the privileged mocking the situation of the poor. And I think that we have to explain this. It's too easy to sit down and say, I don't agree with these people who are, I don't agree, but I want to understand. And it's our duty to make things understandable. If you carry on out of your privileges, out of your situation of power, to ridicule the sacred of people who are powerless, you will pay the price. You will pay the price. I don't agree with what they are doing, but I want to understand why they are doing in such a way. Because from where you are touching the sacred that is helping people to survive in very difficult times. And I would say that this is very important because this has to do with ideology and politics. This has to do with power. So please don't be very quick to accept the terms of the equation put by the West by dismissing the emotions coming from the South. Because it has to do with survival. It has to do with dignity. Who is more dignified in this? I don't want to compare, but I would say I can understand, even though I'm not accepting or I don't justify it. And this is a difference between understanding and justifying. So my conclusion is, let us start by being self-critical. And for the Muslims today in this world, in this globalized world, to reconcile themselves with a sense of spirituality which is not on the defensive, much more confidence, much more openness, just feel good. And say it and repeat this, to laugh, to smile, to be attracted by beauty in art and entertainment is halal. This is the starting point of our understanding of Islam. But it's serious. It's a very serious thing. Because you know what? In this symbolic power struggle, the more you are pushed and you are on the defensive, the more you are reducing the scope in Islam to halal, 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 and haram, haram. And there is an ocean of haram and a very small island of halal. But who is pushing you to do this? It's a power struggle. It's a struggle of symbols, and and psychologically you are changing your mindset, and the state of confidence is lost. The second is to remain intellectually open, and I really think that in all Muslim majority societies and in all the Muslim communities, we should be much more open when it comes to freedom of expression. You should let the people speak. They speak their mind. We should reconcile ourselves with critical thinking. Islam is not about repeating what the scholar is saying. Islam is about understanding what he's saying, and if it's not understood or if it's not clear, is to challenge him or her. And I said him or her. I think that this is where, as Muslims, we have to get out of this controversy things that are helping us to be better ourselves, and not to respond at the periphery, to reassess the center. And then, as I said, in all this discussion, when we are clear about ethics and decency, it's not to be naive about the political and ideological dimensions of these controversies. This is used in a way that is pushing us in a way and avoiding very critical discussions. So there is something that has to do with the rich and the poor, the dominant and the dominated, is a way to aggress or to attack or to reject or to put the people in a situation of reaction, in the reaction to what is said. And I think that we have to get it right. There are political factors and ideological dimensions that we have to be aware of if we want to respond in the best way. Thank you so much.